Well, it's 5 p.m., so we're going to get rolling. I have a couple things to share. And those of you guys that are joining us as attendees, thanks for taking some time out of your busy day. We do record these webinars, so they are available after the fact, and you're welcome to revisit them or share them with somebody else. Today, we thought it would be a great time in the market to talk a little bit about what it takes to get your house ready. So as people reach out to me all the time, we're running a really busy real estate company, and always one of the first questions they always ask me is, Matt, we want to have you come over to tell us what we need to do. And I learned very early in my career that I'm unlikely to be the best resource for that information. If you were to look at my office, it's loaded with like posters from, comic books of my teen years. So there's some Star Wars paraphernalia, things like this that come from Disney World. So I'm not really the best person to give advice around how to prep a home for sale. What I am good at, and what I am going to spend a little bit of time on, is understanding the conditions in the market. And then Melissa and I are going to talk more in depth about what it is exactly that people are looking for and what's most important as you get your house ready to go on the market. So because most people get onto a webinar like this because they have some reasonable expectation as far as what it is that's happening in the market, I thought what I'd do is just share a little bit of information about some of what we're seeing currently in the market. And this will just take us about five minutes or so, but I think it's really important and valuable. So if everybody's on board with that, let me show you guys a little bit of what we're seeing here. Wide in the entire state of Connecticut. That shows a 34% decrease in total available inventory. There is no way that losing 34% of your available inventory doesn't have a dramatic impact on the demand in the marketplace. Let me take it one step further. At the same time that the supply is decreasing, look at what's happening to the number of houses that are being sold. Now, this is the number of homes being taken off the shelf. So here's the analogy I like to draw around this. I want you to think about, owning a store, and every day you put, let's just use toilet paper, for example, because that's a relevant one. Every day as a shopkeeper, you put 10 rolls of toilet paper on the shelf. And every day, on average, between 7 and 8 rolls of toilet paper come off the shelf, and you put 7 or 8 new ones on the shelf. And based on your history, that just about 7 or 8 rolls are going to sell every day. And then one day, 10 of them come off, and you go, wow, I ran out of toilet paper. I better put 10 back. And then the next day, 10 come off, and you say, shoot, 10 must be the new number. I'm going to put 12 on the shelf, and then 12 come off. Eventually, over time, you run out of toilet paper in the back of the store. And now you're just waiting for the truck to show up with more. We're in that situation where what happened was we had built up inventory in our market. And as demand started to increase, we didn't really see it at first because there was enough inventory to go back on the shelf. But now what's happened is there's no more in the back of the store. All the inventory is wiped out. Everything's been eaten. And so the only things that we see that we can buy are the new inventory that comes back on the market. It's the toilet paper that's being manufactured. So look at where we were in February of 2019. 2,900 houses went under contract in February of 2019. Look at where we were in February of 2020. This is right before COVID, just about 3,200. So it was already an increase. But then the pandemic happened and we saw a dramatic shift in the number. Look at those numbers, August, September, and October, how much higher those under contract numbers are compared to the year prior. And in February of 2021, we put 5,220 homes under contract. Now, March data has just been released, April data has just been released, and this trend is continuing. So let's just keep looking at this. So here's what actually sold, because remember, everything that goes under contract in a given month doesn't sell in the same month. The total sold properties year over year, 2 years running, we had an increase of 31% sold, 2,608 homes in the month of February 2019, 3,417 in the month of February 2021. And February 2020, which again, right before the pandemic, we already had that increase that was running at about 2,800. So that was already about 10% up. Now here's the inventory shortage. What you see here is, look at how many new units were coming on the market in February of 2019. February 2019, 5,298 homes were entered into the market. That was the supply that was brought to the marketplace. Now look at the drop, 20% less inventory coming to the marketplace in February of 21. So what's happening is less inventory coming into the store, more people buying it. So we've got this dual impact happening. And everybody's wondering, when is it going to end? By the way, the impact of that 33% increase in median sales price statewide over a 2-year period of time. The vast majority of that showing up in the last 12 months. So people are asking, well, how is it going to end? I'm going to skip over some of this stuff, guys, some of these absorption rate things. So people are, how is it going to end? And they're asking, well, is it a bubble and what's caused it? So in order to understand that, we really have to go back to 2007 and remember that the last time we had a housing, we had a run on housing like this, you have to understand what was happening back then. So back then, the difference was, we had relaxed lending standards around the people who could buy a home. And so typically on an average, in an average year, about 60% of the population are qualified to actually go and get a mortgage and purchase a property. When you relax the lending standards around that, you add an additional 40% of the population to the marketplace that wouldn't otherwise qualify to purchase a home. So just by relaxing the lending standards, we increased the number of potential viable buyers back then by about 40%. So that for every 6 buyers there are today, there were 10 buyers back then. In addition to that, we had all of these people that were able to get into buying homes on different types of mortgages that don't exist anymore. And they were getting loans called ninja loans, no income, no job, no asset loans. They were able to just borrow money from non-existent sources, and everybody became a buyer at that point in time. So there was really nobody that couldn't buy a home. And so that created this bubble. That was what the bubble was. It was all of these potential or all of these buyers that had purchased properties that didn't really have the capacity to pay back the money that they had borrowed. And so when you can't pay it back, builders overbuilt, supply was being built based on a false narrative and false demand. It was understood that there would be this demand would happen in perpetuity, that everybody would be able to buy homes and be able to afford them forever. But the reality was they weren't. And so eventually it came to an end. What that caused was builders, by and large, nationwide, evacuated the market. We have not had building in this country to keep up with just the normal demands of the population growth over the last 10 years. And it's all now sort of coming to light as we're starting to feel this pinch and this crisis around supply. But basically, there were about 10 to 12 million less homes built over the last decade than should have been built, just to keep even, just so that enough homes would be available for the people that would become of age to buy homes. So those homes just weren't built. So they simply don't exist. In addition to that, 2 major changes happened around demographics in our country. Baby boomers came of age and got to a point where they wanted to downsize. At the same time that millennials, who by and large over the last 10 years, and keep in mind that the millennial generation is the second largest generation in this country by total population. And the vast majority of millennials initially made some lifestyle choices that said, we choose to live in urban settings. And this was the dialogue that was going on, that millennials were not following the same pattern as their parents or as their grandparents, and that they were making choices to live in cities. They wanted access to things. They wanted condo living with a gym downstairs, and, they could take a train to work. And so the suburbs, places like central Connecticut, were by and large being evacuated because all of the baby boomers were downsizing and people were leaving and no one was moving in to take their place, until about 5 years ago, when everybody that was in that age bracket that qualifies as a millennial, which I think is like 27 to 38 years old, they all started to realize, hey, maybe a backyard and a dog and a couple extra bedrooms wouldn't be such a bad idea. And so that shift started to happen. We started to see this massive generation, all of these people starting to make lifestyle choices that were different than what they had made prior. So they all started to buy homes, and they became the largest population of home buyers that we had seen since the baby boomers. When the pandemic showed up, what happened was it poured gasoline on that advent, which was already happening. So all of these people that knew that eventually they'd be leaving the city, eventually they'd be looking for a house, they all decided, you know what? I don't want to be in the city anymore. This is no longer my thing. I think that I'm going to opt out, and I'm going to just go get a house now. It basically took what would have happened over a 5 to 7 year cycle, and it compressed it down into the last 18 months. And that's what's happened. Now take that and then add to it that people no longer have to all go into work. And we now have remote working opportunities for people. And this is where we're compounding the impact of this. So now the really crazy part happens. We've added about $10 trillion worth of extra money into the marketplace through federal stimulus. We've also got interest rates that are below 3% in some cases, 3.5% for 30-year mortgages. All of these lifestyle changes, all of this has happened and just created this bottleneck around supply. So what's going to change that? It seems like that the only thing that's going to change that is going to be some sort of inflation that starts to hit the market, which starts to drive interest rates up in order to cool down the demand. But also we need to start seeing more inventory show up to actually adequately supply all of these people that need a place to live. So what we're experiencing here is somewhat unprecedented. So for those of you that are looking to sell your home, the good news is we probably have somewhere between 18 to 24 months more of this heated market, presuming that nothing dramatic changes and there's nothing externally that changes the way that our marketplace and our economy is working. Other than that, there's not really much as far as any indication that I see that this is going to end anytime soon. So let me ask you guys on the panel here, what are you seeing in regard to some of this stuff? Are you do you feel like there's some stuff that I'm missing here, or is there more that's happening, or have you read anything interesting?
Well, Matt, what I've seen as a closing attorney is a significant shift where we all remember when we got out of college, you know, if you're dating, you're single, you always got your apartment for 4 or 5 years, and then your realtor helped you get that apartment, then use that same realtor to get you home. I've been noticing it's accelerated again with COVID. I've been seeing a trend the last 18 months, and it just went to a different level where I'm seeing that they're skipping they're getting out of college, getting a good job, either single person or couple, and they're buying a home relevant to their income based on the low rates and skipping the entire rental period. So that's a whole nother period that would have 4 or 5 years of people that were rented are now just jumping immediately into the housing market. So it's another whole generation of people coming right out of college or grad school and not even considering renting because the rents are so high. I've seen the payments, it actually is cheaper to buy and amortize over 30 years than to rent.
Yeah, there's no question.
That's a whole nother, my sister-in-law just moved to Toronto in the beginning of COVID, 27 years old. Her husband is 28, my brother-in-law, and the rents were so high, they ended up buying. And they worked remotely through entire COVID, and they didn't even think of renting, to just skip that whole thing. So
it's another whole part of the market that's being impacted, and that's just going to create and further exacerbate this right. bottleneck we have. By the way, I mean, I just would go on the record and say, it's a really hot market. What's wild, though, is that those of us that are in the industry really prefer a balanced market. A balanced market is a much more favorable environment. This is awesome for people that want to sell their home and cash out, but most people need to live somewhere too. And so if you're selling your home and you're cashing out and you're making a lot of money, that's awesome, but you're going to struggle to find something to buy. And so there's really no perfect storm here, because you're going to win on one side and lose on the other. So it's just part of it. I would also add, I think that all of this stuff, you know, we have to be conscious of the difference between what happened in '07, what happened in '08, and now the amount of cash and capital. I mean, Rich, how many cash closings are you seeing?
I've never seen more I probably have done more cash closings since COVID began than I did in the previous 10 years.
So there's another piece of this that is really important to understand, is that it's long been posited that the greatest transfer of wealth in our nation's history was going to happen over the next 10 to 20 years. And that's because as baby boomers come of age, their wealth, which by the way, the baby boomer generation was they were really tied to managing and keeping their wealth. There's a lot of money that's being held and owned by people that are over 65 years old. And so they have lots of cash, and all of that cash is going to be basically handed down to their kids over the course of the next 15 to 20 years. And we're already seeing that as it enters the real estate market. So you're talking billions and billions of dollars that's being transferred from one generation to another. And the thing that's interesting about that is that the millennial generation and the Gen X and younger, they don't have the same money management skill set that baby boomers do. So they're willing to instead of keep that money in a savings account, they're using it and they're putting it into the marketplace at rates that we've never seen before. Why is that different? Why is that relevant in real estate? Is that in 2007, what were the closings like, Rich? Were there cash deals all over the place?
No, there wasn't.
No, 0% down, 1% down, 2% down. The
Yeah.
equity in the real estate market was next to none. There was no equity in real
That's
estate,
correct.
which is why it was a bubble. It was inflated. It was empty. There was no actual value in it. Today, there's a lot of equity value inside of real estate. The transactions that are happening with real equity, not just with credit. And that's why, you know, it's a cautionary tale. Now, that doesn't mean that prices aren't going to settle down and level off, but when you have that much equity in a market, it's unlikely to see it pop. We're not going to see some falling off of a cliff of value here. Adding to that, and this is my own personal theory backed up by zero economic data. This is just the Matt Miale theory. You know, Connecticut's just kind of seen its day here. Like we've been in central Connecticut, we have been undervalued for so long compared to northern New Jersey, southern Massachusetts, and all of the surrounding areas. Like on the whole, if you look in the Northeast, anywhere from Delaware all the way up, really even DC, all the way up the coast, central Connecticut is a bargain. Still, even at the prices that we are seeing today, where people are saying, this is crazy, these prices are out of control, they're actually still not out of control compared to what Maplewood, New Jersey might sell for, or outside of Boston. And I think that that's another thing that we have to keep in mind in our area, is that there's probably still more room to go before we're considered overpriced.
Well, Matt, I just have to, one thing I think maybe it's going to creep into Hartford County is all my clients are coming from the city, New Jersey, et cetera. For example, Tom's River, that area. They're looking at the Connecticut shore from Fairfield all the way to Stonington as completely undervalued. And literally, when I'm saying every beach, we close in Rhode Island as well. Every second home I'm doing around the shore, it's all cash, because they're coming up from New Jersey or being relocated from different parts of the country, and they consider Connecticut undervalued. And that includes Hartford County.
I couldn't agree more. Well, I thought it would be a worthwhile way to start this.
Well, here, I got one curiosity question. What investment groups buying property in Connecticut? What are you seeing with that for
institutional investors?
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't seen many of those at all. I don't know, Jason, if you have any insight into that. I don't, you know, I know that there are, but you know, you hear about this stuff. And for me, Ryan, it's much more anecdotal than it is hands-on. I have not seen any institutional buying, and you know, I'm not tooting my own horn, but we're the #1 production team in the state of Connecticut. And I don't think we've had a single institutional sale.
I haven't seen anything either myself, nothing.
Yeah. So
yeah, you hear the stories, you know, for sure. I got a call last week from a guy that has a multifamily in New Britain. Said he just got a knock on the door, and it was a guy, you know, from Pennsylvania that has a group of people that are buying up a ton of multis.
Yeah.
and they made him an offer right there, is what he told me. Whether there's truth to that or there's anything behind it that would, orchestrate that deal getting to closing, I would be surprised, but you hear the stories anyway.
Well, that's just it. And again, a lot of it seems anecdotal to me. Now that said, I want to qualify my own personal experience is not in some of the areas like Bridgeport or Hartford, where you do hear about these institutional buyers coming in and buying up large swaths of property. I don't do a lot of business in those markets. So that may be happening, but I just haven't seen it or experienced it. So it's a good question, Ryan. It's something I'd have to look into.
Yeah, well, because that's the cash purchasing was what was curious.
The cash purchasing is happening from
personal wealth or family wealth. Yeah.
Yeah. Individuals.
All the Bitcoin money.
Yeah, right. Bitcoin money. Yeah, exactly. Let me just show you guys lastly, so this is the most recent March data. This is just from CTMLS, Smart MLS statewide. This gives us a picture of Hartford County. Just take a look at 2020 to 2021. One of the things that I find fascinating is look at the number of new listings that came on the market in March. That was only up 1.8%. So the reality is we actually listed more homes in March of 2021 than we did in 2020. Keep in mind, March of 2020 is when COVID hit. So we saw a decrease in listing inventory because people were like, whoa, I'm not going on the market. That's crazy. But here's what's crazy is sales are up 14%. Closed sales are up 4.4. Days on market is down 42%. Median sales price is up 11%. Average sales price is up 16%. This is just year over year in March. Inventory of homes for sale, and this is the big one, down 47.8%. So that is what's knocking this market back over and over. There's nothing to buy. And month supply of inventory down almost 56% on single family homes. So year to date, you can see new listings year to date is down 19.1%. Pending sales is up 6.5%. Closed sales is up 6.2%. The way you hear in the marketplace, you would think that those pending sales numbers would be like 400%, but it's 6.5%. It's up, but it's not nuts. It's the inventory story that's really driving this. It's that we've been up so consistently month over month over month, just eating the inventory off the shelf. There's just nothing left. Average sales price up 18%, percent of list price received. This is fascinating. Look at this. Year to date, the percent of list price received is 100.9%, that's on average across everything in Hartford County. So that means that everything is selling for over asking price on average. That's wild.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
I just want to point out, I think you hit on something critically about undervaluing in this area because it's coincidental, but today we're in the Boston Globe, and we're not just talking about Newton Highlands and Charleston and those surrounding areas. Greater Boston, going out to Framingham, farther out, areas that would never have been considered suburbs of Boston, our average sales price is $725.
Right. So, and look at ours, right.
And look at us. And look at us at the average price right here. And that's where you're seeing New Yorkers coming up and the commuter rails, and they're seeing the value here. They're intelligent buyers. They're going price per square foot. And trust me, they're seeing the undervalue here. And I think you hit on something critically here today.
I'm not going to get into politics on this. This is not a political statement.
Nope.
Anybody wanted to have a future political bandwagon to jump on, get a high-speed rail platform that puts people into New York City in under 2 hours and puts people into Boston in under an hour and 20, and figure out how to get that from Hartford into both of those markets so that you could actually get people who could commute into those cities in a reasonable amount of time. And Connecticut will never be undervalued again. You just have to be able to serve those two major metros. That's it. And, Elon Musk wants to put a tunnel under LA. So it must be possible. Maybe we have too much rock here.
The vacuum tube. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, all right. So with that said, everybody's got a little bit of backstory, a little bit of background about what's going on. So we're going to talk about, let's say that this is the right market for you. And you've decided, like, you know what, this is the market for me to list my home. And I really think that, I'd like to get started. What you're most likely going to do is you're going to call me and you're going to say, hey, Matt, we want you to come over and tell us what we should do. You know, what should we do? You know, how do we get our house ready? Hang on, I'm going to start my new slideshow here. And you're going to say, Matt, we want to get our house ready. And what do we do? And so how do I get my house prepped? So we're going to jump right to, well, by the way, here's our panelists. We're all going to have a moment to chat a little bit later. And we're going to talk a little bit about, and we're going to go right to Melissa. And Melissa, you're going to tell us what do we need to do when we want to get our house for sale? Right? Because what I'm going to tell everybody, and this is my standard line, and if you're on this call and you've ever worked with me, you know that this is exactly what I say. I always say, my wife doesn't let me decorate my own house, so there's no way that I'd be authorized to decorate your house. But what I will do is have a professional come in and consult us on what the best way to get your house on the market is. So Melissa, when you talk to us a little bit about the need, the design, why is it so important? What has your experience been?
Sure. So staging is a critical component to the real estate process for buying and selling. And it is so important to have your home buyer ready, right? So that means when people come in, they see a decluttered, depersonalized space that's fully furnished, nice, clean, and organized. But when they walk in, they don't know who was there the week before. And I like to think of that as like an Airbnb listing. So when I go into the staging consults, I always share with them that we want to get your home like an Airbnb or a home away listing. You walk in, it's fully furnished, it's clean and organized, but buyers don't know who was there the week before. They're not looking at, you know, your vacation photos to Disney or your wedding 25 years ago, because it's really important that we can tap into their minds and see how they feel when they walk into home with a blank slate, and how they can envision themselves entertaining and building memories into this home.
You know, what I like to add to that is that what we've learned in the time that we've been in business, we've sold over 3,000 houses. What we've learned is that the process of buying a home is an emotional one. It's not a practical or pragmatic one. It is for some people, but if we were all purely pragmatic and practical about our buying decisions, we would all live in concrete boxes, right, with like 4 beds in each corner and running water out of a wall, because that's fundamentally all we actually need. But really, when we buy a house, what we're doing is we're imagining a lifestyle. We're imagining the life that we want to live and what that's going to look like inside of those 4 walls. And so the staging component is really the art direction of giving people the widest berth to imagine the life that they want to live. And I think one of the other pieces to add, Melissa, is that it's also about the photography, which I think is the thing that a lot of sellers miss, is that they think about selling their home and staging so that it looks and feels like how you live there. But the reality is that most people, when they see a home for the first time, they're going to see it in 2 dimensions, not 3. And something that you're really good at, Melissa, and designers are good at, is making sure that when we see a home in person in 3 dimensions, that we stage it for 2 dimensions, because sometimes things that are in the field of vision in the forefront, when we take a picture, they become the centerpiece rather than the space inside of the house. So that's another thing that I think really plays a role in it.
Sure. And, you know, staging is the creative direction of, say, a commercial, right? So the commercial is, we're trying to sell your house. So when you go in with, you know, the 3D renderings, the virtual tours, and the photos, it's my job to go in there and get that set staged in the best possible condition so that it appeals to as many buyers as possible. And we have one shot, right, to be able to make that happen. So it's super important when sellers are preparing to list their home that we go in as soon as possible to do the staging consult, because it can take a little bit of time to get them ready. And I always go in. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially when people have lived there for a really long time.
Yeah, that can be hard when you have someone who's been in there for 20 plus years. You know, you see a level of collection of like 5 years and under, the 15 years and up, the 20, 25. It's different layers because you've just been there so long. You've accumulated everything. You've grown children in there and built years of memories. So I think it's really important too, is sometimes the sellers can be a little bit nervous before I come, wondering what is she going to do? How is this going to be a huge process? So it's super important that I do have that preliminary conversation with your sellers and kind of guide them through the process as to what to expect during that staging consult. Some of them want to prepare just a little bit before I get in, and some are like, we don't have the time, just come in and do your thing. But I think what's really important to stress, especially the market that we're in and everyone's time is stretched with working and living from home, is I go in and I only give recommendations and suggestions that I truly feel will make a difference for the photos, for your listing price, and days on market. So I won't be going in and giving recommendations that don't hold a basis of value. And I feel when I say that to sellers that it does resonate with them, and they're like, okay, she's not going to come in here and we're not going to be taking a month to do all of this. It's really strategic, well thought out, and goes with what the market wants to see.
Now, Melissa, you're also an interior designer. So tell me, what's the difference? Like, where do you draw the line when you go in for a staging consult? One of the things that I get feedback about from potential sellers is, well, Matt, are we going to have to redo our bathroom? Do we have to redo our kitchen? How do you define that for people where, where's the line between design and staging?
Sure. So it's very important to have a conversation with the sellers when you walk in. And I always like to ask them, what are some renovation projects, if any, that they plan on taking? So we really assess what work they're going to do before they list. And I can get a really good picture right away. And some sellers are going to say they want to renovate a kitchen. Can you help me? And I absolutely can help with that. Some say we're just looking for a color consult. We know that blue and red walls in a dining room, we love it, but it's really not going to fly, and it's not going to photograph well, and it's going to make our room appear smaller than it is. So can you help me with that? And before I leave, I always give them, recommendations for paint colors and whatnot that can help. So the good thing working with me is hand in hand with the staging and the interior design is, if you want to update your bathroom or your kitchen to increase your listing price, that's a conversation that I have with the seller and that I have with the agent as well. So we determine what makes sense. They have $15,000 to redo their kitchen. We're not going to get new cabinets, but can we paint them? Certainly. Can we update the hardware and the lighting? Absolutely. So, it really comes down to what their budget is, what they want to take on given their lifestyle and work commitments, and how much time do we have realistically to get that done.
And I think also you tapped on this earlier, also what their return on investment will be. So they might have a $15,000 budget, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to spend that, because there may not be a place to put it where they're actually going to make money back, right? So we know that, well, let me ask you, what are the biggest impact projects that most sellers should be prepared to take on?
Number one, painting. Number two, kitchen, anything in kitchen and bath updates. So if you can update a crazy floor from the 70s with vinyl wood planking, that's wonderful. Painting your cabinets, updating hardware, changing out a very taste-specific backsplash. Kitchens, bathrooms, paints, and flooring go a very long way. And then also making some light updates to the landscaping out front. Curb appeal is very important.
I've often pointed out that the front door is the first and last thing that a buyer will see. So that front door and front walkway, sometimes people will neglect that. They spend all their time inside getting their house ready. And then you walk up to the front door and the bricks are loose, or, there's something chipped, or the handrail's loose, or something like that. And it's that front door, that first and last impression, that you really want to make sure, gets taken care of. So, Melissa, what are some trends that you're seeing now inside of design? Like, what are some things that maybe they weren't here 2 years ago, but are super popular now?
Sure. So I'm seeing color come back and wall colors. So I'm seeing some greens and blues and yellows, which is nice. Everyone is loving the modern farmhouse black and white, and then they love the timeless gray and white. But we're seeing clients being more comfortable with taking risks. So we're seeing unique light fixtures, wall color. That's super important. And then in a kitchen, we're always going to see for years to come, the islands that make really that big statement of painted cabinets and the different countertop than the rest. So those are some of the trends that we are seeing.
What do you like to do when you go into a house? Like what are some things that you like to guide people toward?
When I'm going in for a staging consult or design?
when you're doing a staging consult, like what are some common things that you see almost every single time? Like I know, because I deal with home inspections, that there's always going to be a reverse polarity outlet in just about every single house. That there's always going to be an outlet that isn't ground fault protected. What are some things that are just almost every single house you stage is guidance that you give to somebody?
Number one is storage. So when I walk in, I immediately see in a lot of homes, the shoes, the coats, the jackets, dog leashes, as soon as you walk in. And it can be overwhelming for anyone, especially a buyer walking in. So we really need to be strategic on how we're going to store all of those items. Anytime I go into a condo, a ranch, or a cape, super important. I'm hyper focused on closet space. We dive deep and go into them because we always want to showcase that you have at least 50% storage available in your closets. In a larger home, 3,500 square feet and up, you got closets everywhere you turn. It's not a big issue. Condos, super important. So a lot of the clients will say, I didn't know you were going to go into the closets. And I'm like, closet sell a condo, storage sells a condo. It's super important. So I see storage, and I see lots of things on kitchen countertops. So everyone wants to walk in and feel that they can put every single appliance they've ever owned on a countertop. But we need to clear those countertops so they can envision putting their Vitamix and blender and all of that on there. That's really important, is decluttering, storage, and updating paint colors. Just quick refresh, like paints and refinishing your floors, transform your house for just thousands, for not a lot.
I have another question, which might seem a little bit out of left field, but what about basements and garages? Like, we often get clients that will ask, like, my basement is full of stuff, my attic is full of stuff. What can people do in those spaces to make those spaces not look overly cluttered? Because I know when most people are moving, it's because they've outgrown the space that they're in and they've run out of room. And so those basements, attics, and garages wind up full of stuff. So what do you recommend to people around that?
I recommend, when I go into homes where basements are chock full or sheds and attics or filled to the ceiling, is it's really important. I want clients to go through and determine what they're going to keep, what they're going to take, and what they're going to donate. And I want them to start decluttering and organizing that space. It's not to say they can't store anything in there, but there's a way you store things in a closet or a garage or a basement, right? It needs to be intentional, organized storage. That's very, very important. And then when you're storing items in a basement, a lot of the times the clients are super busy. So they put all of their Tupperware containers at the bottom of the stairs. But that's a blockage to trying to have people walk around. So I say, when you're storing in the basement, I want you to push it to the far end of a wall where you're looking at that wall last, and not storing it under the staircase or as soon as you walk down the stairs. And shed versus a garage, I'd rather have you store everything up to the ceiling if you have to in a shed than a garage, because people want to look to see, hey, in this one car garage, can I fit my SUV? It's really hard to tell. I don't know. Let's go look at the other house and just see.
Right. I
try and keep garages organized when other storage, space is limited.
Especially because of your point, even though no one seems to ever park in their garages anymore. I don't.
It's full with toys. I totally get it.
Yeah, we keep our $100 plastic toys in there so our $50,000 car can stay outside.
Yeah.
100% understood. So what about you guys? You have any questions for Melissa? She's been a wealth. Rich, from the legal standpoint, Jay, mortgage, Ryan? No? I figured I'll throw you guys off your game here.
No. The only thing I remember is any client that, we've talked about this before, that tells me weeks in advance that they're going to list the home. And when they describe to me what they're going to do to declutter and make that house put their best foot forward, that home always sells first on the block, especially when they know their neighbors are about to go in the spring market as well. And it literally sticks out like a sore thumb. First impressions are lasting impressions, whether you're selling a classic car or you're selling a beautiful home. The pictures are everything, as Matt said. As Melissa said, just the first impressions, looking at that home decluttered and picture. And so a family can, envision how they're going to live in there, not just the current family that's living there. I think it's critical.
No, it's definitely critical. Absolutely. So I want to, before we wrap up, Melissa, any final parting thoughts about what we need to know in order to get our house ready for sale?
I would like, the first step that's super helpful is to go through before I come in and determine what you're going to take with you to the new home, or develop a game plan or a plan of action. It's more overwhelming, I think, for clients to figure out how they're going to do it, or process that out and schedule the time, right? If you have 3 little kids, it takes more effort to be able to schedule when you're going to do it, rather than, doing it and organize the boxes. So a lot of clients get overwhelmed with just figuring out how to do it rather than doing it. They know it's not rocket science what you need to do when we send the report. So I really like to ease clients' fears and concerns and kind of talk with them and strategize a game plan. Is the husband going to watch their kids for the weekend, and then the wife's going to tackle the first floor? So then we know the following weekend, the wife can watch the children and the husband can do the second floor.
I think that is so critical what you do there, is that give them a plan, because the overwhelm is so real for people. The reality of like, I'm so overwhelmed. Where am I even going to start? And I think that's a piece of staging that we call it part of the staging consult, but it's really one of the most valuable things that has nothing to do with the furniture, the paint color, or the pictures. It's much more about like more project management also, which I think you do an excellent job of.
Thank you. I had a client of yours a few.
I just have a question for you for clients. What's your ideal period, weeks in advance, before somebody would want to list with Matt and his team? What's your period if it's a husband and wife with kids, what's your ideal number of weeks prior to listing that you can accomplish your goals without stressing them out? What's the time period if people call me that I could tell them?
3 to 4 weeks.
That's it? Okay.
Yeah. And Rich, I'll tell you, I tell people the sooner the better. So sometimes I'll have people call me and say, we're not ready to list for 4 or 5 months for whatever reasons, kids' school or season or a job or something. And I always say, the sooner I can have my stager designer come out, the more time you'll have to work your way through this list, because the list isn't going to change. The plan isn't going to change. It's just the amount of time that you have to do it. And it does depend too, because some people will poke away at it a little bit one weekend every week or something. Other people will just go full bore at it. So some people can turn it around in a week. Others people take 6 months. But the sooner the better, because once you have the plan, you can just go room by room by room, just kind of like Melissa talked about. You can have a strategy and it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. But she's right. Ideally, for a standard size home in our area, call it 2,000 to 3,000 square feet, you're going to need 3 or 4 weeks, just assuming that everybody has jobs and other stuff going on. Like, it's just going to take that much time to get each room ready. All right. Well, let me thank you, Melissa, for giving us so much guidance around this. Before we wrap up, I obviously want to take some time and introduce our partners and our friends who've joined us: Ryan Keating, Jason Kilduff, and Richard Witt. So, Rich, what are you seeing in the market? Give us kind of a 5-minute overview: who you are, what you do, and what's happening out there.
My name is Richard Witt. I have 2 law offices, one in West Hartford Center and one in Plainville, and we close in Connecticut and Rhode Island, and been doing this since 1998. And we're actually seeing a busy market, but it's actually slowing down a bit only because inventory is going down. So we're literally, I've spoken to a number of attorneys. We have a sort of a group of friends all over the state, and we all have a little coffee chat, and we're seeing it across the board in all the counties where it's not that we're not fully staffed and can't handle the volume. We have 7 closing paralegals ready to go. It's just there's not enough homes. I mean, I had one attorney tell me in Plainville, there's only 2 active listings right now in the town of Plainville. So if you have 7 law firms or 9, there's actually 10 in Plainville, and there's 2 active listings, that should tell you supply and demand, there's not much available. So we're actually seeing this on the back end now, along with loan officers, and I'm sure realtors on the front line.
If I can add that, it actually, I think it was in Forbes last week, there are more licensed real estate agents in the country than there are homes for sale.
Wow.
So, which by the way, I mean, is a tragedy, because the vast majority of those people are not going to survive in this type of a climate, but there are more licensees than there are homes for sale, which is, to your point, how not everybody can make a living like that. So It's going to be a difficult market for people.
Yeah, well, I look for the balanced market that you talked about earlier in the seminar. You know, it's just not much better.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for your time today and all your contributions. So Jason, what's happening out there? What's going on in the mortgage world?
Well, the rates are still phenomenally low. You know, they ticked up a little bit, probably over the last 30 days, but they're starting to come back down. You know, we're still, you know, depending on the situation, high 2s, low 3s, ballpark. You know, there's a lot of people out there that have been pre-qualified that are calling in and saying, I know that we talked about my price range being around 250. This house is on for 250, but we want to go in at 285. Right? Are those numbers going to work for us? So there's a lot of that going on. So it's always important that if you think that you're looking at 250, but you find the house of your dreams, be prepared to bid over, and just make sure that you speak with the loan officer about, is that in your wheelhouse as far as affordability and things.
Well, and a lot of the guidance that we're giving our clients now, just the fact is, as uncomfortable as it is, listing price is nothing more than marketing. And in this climate, it will require you to offer the seller more than their asking price in most cases. And so we're advising most of our buyers to not look up to their maximum loan allowable, to look a little under that, knowing that if they're really uncomfortable spending more than 250, they ought not be looking at anything that's more than 220, because they're likely going to have to pay 250 for that 220 house.
That makes total sense. I mean, in light of the economic conditions, it's a good time to stretch if you can make it work for your own personal financial situation. It's a good time to take your 250, and if you can get what you want and it costs you another 30,000, the money is so cheap out there. The interest rates are so low that if you can afford to stretch it, it might be advisable to do so.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Ryan, what do we need to know about insurance, about the insurance market right now? What's happening out there?
The insurance market's great. With, I mean, the property market, the home market has actually been on a steady increase, similar to what you're talking on before. Construction and new home building has been down. And then obviously, well, not obviously, a lot of people don't realize the price of lumber and what that's gone up to.
Well, and adding to that, it's another reason that we're not seeing as much new home building is that not only has the supply chain been so interrupted and the price of lumber went up, one of the things that a builder educated me about, because there's a lot of this talk that, the supply chain got interrupted, it's all because of COVID. Actually, a lot of the lumber prices were impacted by those massive forest fires that we had. That was coming anyway. We didn't even know that. So I thought it was all pandemic related. And the builder said, Matt, we knew the lumber prices were going up ages ago because everything got burned. And so there was just, again, supply and demand. Supply was already down. It just all got exacerbated when the pandemic hit. It just caused everything to happen so rapidly. And adding to your point, Ryan, in addition to that, we have this supply, we have this lack of supply around skilled labor in the marketplace too, because there's not enough plumbers and electricians and carpenters out there to build homes. So building new construction is so much more expensive, not only because the cost of the materials is up, but the cost of the labor is up. Just adding to your dialogue around that.
Yes. So all of that affects the replacement cost of a home. which is trending with the rates going up, that, you know, you might be buying a home at one. They might say the current homeowner that their insurance is XYZ and the dwelling coverage they've had it at has been 350,000, 400,000, but now modernized rates are looking at 500 to accommodate for the building. And renewals are seeing that, but they're not taking as large of increases because that's been on the books with carriers for a while.
Yeah.
And then the other side of things is kind of, as Melissa was talking, I was thinking like putting stuff away. I've not experienced it or know of it, but I'm sure it happens. The liabilities to trip and falls, things like that. If you don't have a tidy home or a loose railing, certain maintenance things that should go into place before you sell your home too. Just little things that, you know, the traffic through homes is kind of probably going back up with open houses, but the virtual elements, so you didn't have to really worry about some of that.
Yeah.
And with how fast they're selling, but you know.
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a steady increase in the activity that we've seen inside of houses going for sale. One of the things that also showed up, I think it's May 19th, the governor is lifting all COVID restrictions except for the masking. Is that, do you read that same? So what's fascinating about that, as far as it pertains to real estate, is that we've been handling COVID, exposure and, open houses, one party at a time. All of that will change again as of the 19th of May. And we basically go back to the old standards of open houses, et cetera, with the exception of masking continuing. So it'll be fascinating to see what kind of an impact that has on the market. So,
yeah, I mean, sanitation, the cleanliness or wiping down germs, et cetera. I mean, it's going to be the same thing if someone goes in a restaurant or any store and they got COVID, can you trace it back to that event? But I think from what I've seen and what I just saw in Dallas recently, which has been pretty open, in Utah, I mean, most people, it's a 50-50, people walking around with masks, people maintaining their distances. So at open houses, I imagine that would be, in Connecticut, so much more.
Yeah. It's certainly gonna change on May 19th. That's for sure. So, well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank our attendees. Ryan, thank you. Jason, Rich, and Melissa, especially. I think Melissa turned her camera off, but guys, anybody here who's watching, who has any questions, I want to encourage you, reach out to us directly. Any one of us on this call is happy to give you guidance, assistance, help, insight into whatever it is that you might need, whether that's pertaining to the law, your mortgage, your insurance, your design, or buying or selling a house. We're all here to support you and help you in your plan. So thanks for attending, and I hope everybody has an awesome night. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.